Hey world, I did a post, the dogs are all excited. I did a post on Instagram the other day about how to know how to plant, and it got quite a lot of comments and things like that. So I thought I would go into a bit more detail here because obviously Instagram you only get tiny little snippets that you can write. But yeah, how to know how to plant is something that I've had to learn since being in Portugal all these years, and I think it applies everywhere in the world. Is what we tend to do is we tend to take um, our knowledge or someone else's knowledge that we've picked the brains of from our countries that we live in, and we try to do them in the countries we move to, like me as a Brit coming to Portugal, and it just doesn't work. Or if it works, it doesn't work as effectively. And the reasons for that are that it's a completely different climate. So things like, see these raised beds, work really well in the UK, and they generate heat inside, they reduce frost, that kind of thing. It's really effective. Here in Portugal, not so much, because the summers are so long and so intense. We don't have any rain often for many, many, many months, and it gets extremely hot. The raised beds dry out a lot. So these raised beds were already here when we moved here, but they are hugel beds. Well, some of the beds were here when we moved here, and we've extended them. So they are hugel beds, and this is how you get around raised beds in a hot country: is you make them into hugels. So you're layering lots of deliciously lovely nutrient dense twigs and branches and wood and mulch and compost and all sorts of things into these beds, and this bit's important, the other thing that you have to do is you have to then create shade. So see these arches, goes goes that way. See these arches? In the summer, these are absolutely full of beans and pumpkins and cucumber and things like that, and they create shade for the things in the beds. So even in the middle of the summer, when it can be 40 degrees for a good proportion of the day, particularly the middle ones, where they are there, and the inside or the outside ones are moist still at the end of the day, and that's because they're not only are they hugel culture beds, so they've got a lot of nutrients and a lot of moisture can be held in the bed, but there is this shade created by growing plants, other plants up around them. So that's really important if you're going to have raised beds, for instance, here. And the other thing is, and we did this in our last couple of places as well, is proper hugel beds. So you're digging down at least 1/2 metre, you're filling it with the same sort of branches and food waste and mulch and compost and all sorts of goodness, and then you're coming up 1/2 metre as well. So all the beds to start with were at least 1/2 metre up, and then it drops over a period of time, because obviously the plants start to use all the goodness that's collected in those beds, and everybody wants some love. And also obviously any holes that are in between branches and stuff it breaks down, so the whole lot will drop. So that's why you come up so far. You have to come up at least 1/2 metre, if not more, because it will, at least over the first year, at least drop to level with the ground, and you might even have to add a bit more in if you've got like some holes almost happening if you haven't put enough in. So these hugelkultur beds that are made into the ground, just not layered on top of the ground like some hugelkultur beds are, these create a big hole underneath which stores water. So in the last place and in this place, we were watering at least half as much as anybody else, because there is this kind of like almost pond underneath. I mean, I guess there's probably not that much water, but you know, there is a space to be able to be a pond, to be able to store water in there and moisture, and again loads of nutrients and stuff. And basically what I'm getting at is that how to know how to plant wherever you are in the world is to look at what the locals are doing, look at what particularly the older local people are doing. Here they all make hugelkultur beds for trees and things, some for veg and stuff, and if they don't make hugelkultur beds, they are all making trenches, and they make big trenches. And for potatoes and things, like everything else, cabbages, stuff, that does well in these kinds of beds, but obviously potatoes, sweet potatoes, normal potatoes, they need a bit more depth. That doesn't have loads of branches and twigs and things in it. Otherwise you're going to have trouble getting your potatoes out. So for those sorts of things, then we've always made big long trenches. And what you do with the long trenches is you just stick loads of water down, you like stick a hose on the end of the trench, and it just floods the whole trench. And then that actually, because it's a trench, it doesn't run off to anywhere else. It stays where the roots are for the vegetables, so it's much more effective water-wise, saving water and using as much water as possible, and also means you don't need to water as often. And a lot of the older Portuguese here, they do a thing called flash flooding. So they're actually, even in the height of the summer when it's super hot, sometimes they're only watering every 2 or 3 days, because they just completely flash flood the trenches, and that sees these plants over and for another day or two. So you know what to know, how to know what to how to plant is really looking at what the locals are doing, considering your resources, like do you have much water? You know, you might think you have a lot of water, but somewhere like Portugal, loads of people run out in the summer. Loads of water runs dry, loads of streams run dry, loads of wells run dry, particularly if it's a longer and harsher summer than normal. So you know, it's nice to go crazy and start planting loads of plants, but you have to consider how much water that's going to take in the summer months, and do you have more than one source of water? And then also, like I say, consider your own resources as well. Do you have 1 or 2 hours for watering every single day of the summer? Do you have 1 or 2 hours for weeding and harvesting and preserving? At least 1 or 2 hours for this every day of the summer. Also considering that somewhere like in Portugal here, we have winter gardens as well as summer gardens. We can grow a lot of things all year round. So it's not just quick, I'll just work really hard for a few months. You know, the garden does take some sort of attention, although you wouldn't believe it from mine maybe, all year round. So do you have that? Are you forward thinking about compost or manure? The soil quality, for instance, here can be generally quite poor and quite sandy, which is another reason that hugelkultur beds are really good. So are you considering your compost heap? And I'll go into another video about compost heaps, because yeah, that's a lot more to go into, and I think it deserves its own video. So yeah, are you considering your resources, your energy, your mental health? Because as enjoyable as gardening can be, it can get super overwhelming if you've got 10 kilos of something that you all of a sudden have to preserve. when you've got loads of other jobs to do, just because you've realised that it's all going to go off otherwise. Are you considering animals, because that's going to give you a regular source of manure? Otherwise you have to factor in getting that from somewhere every spring and every autumn to, put some more nutrients back into the soil, and or compost, doing the compost instead. And yeah, the resources water wise, the soil quality, what are your neighbours doing, see what they're like, the older Portuguese here, what are they doing, and do what they're doing, because it works for a reason. We might think that we know better with our smart young ideas, but I tell you, they've been doing it like that for a reason here for a long time. And yeah, just consider all those things. And the last thing I would say to consider is, it's really I know a lot of us want to bring plants and flowers and vegetables and even animals from the countries we're from, because we love them so much. But the reason that certain things thrive here is because they're from this country or wherever you are. So they thrive because they have adapted over a very long time to the climate, the water, the potential diseases that the plants might get, the insects, the rodents. So yes, it's lovely to have some fancy ass, I don't know, tomato from, I don't know, some other country, because you love that tomato so much. But if it's not native to this country, or at least a neighbouring country where things are similar, you're probably going to find that you have a lot of problems with it. It's going to get eaten by rodents and insects far more. It's going to require a lot more watering and probably a lot more nutrients, and it is likely to get a lot more disease as well. So just consider, again, there's a reason why people plant the things they plant here, and there's a reason why that those plants do really well, and there's also a reason why, or reason for, not getting completely overwhelmed by everything because you wanted to do it all and be good at it all straight away. And I always recommend to newbies coming that just pick 4 or 5 at the most plants, veggies or whatever, to really focus on and get really good at, because it can get really disheartening if you start failing at them, and don't have any crop, or the animals eat them all, or whatever it is, because you've tried to do it all and you've put your heart and soul and all the love and money and everything else and time into it, and then you feel like it's failed for some reason because you were trying to do it all and you couldn't manage it all. So yeah, that's some thoughts from me about making it easier on yourself, and then also then getting a nice harvest at the end of it that you can manage to deal with. And on the note of harvesting, actually, before I finish, also get good at that, before you even plant the stuff, or at least whilst it's initially growing. Learn from someone, perhaps like me or something, how to preserve, how to can, how to ferment, how to dehydrate, those sorts of things. Consider how you're going to store the stuff, and this is really important. If you grow all this stuff and you end up with, I don't know, 50 kilos of potatoes, I don't know, you probably end up with more than that, 150 kilos of potatoes, and the same again in sweet potatoes, and then all the other veggies and stuff. Fantastic, that's amazing that you've done that, but how are you going to store it? Do you definitely have somewhere dry, but dark, rodent proof, insect proof, somewhere where it can get air, to store all these things? And if not, then maybe storage is the first thing that you focus on before you start to actually plant anything, because if you don't have adequate places for storing it, it would be such a shame if it went to waste then, because you had a huge wonderful harvest and succeeded at that, but then completely forgot about the storage. So anyway, that's my thoughts on this topic, and how to make it easier for ourselves. Get loads of lovely veg, store lots of things for the future, and enjoy it as we go too. So ciao for now.